to episode 26 of Radio Omnicore. I'm your host, Colleen McClintock, and you're listening to the show that is guaranteed to teach you something useful and introduce you to a dynamic and interesting guest. In studio today, we welcome back Hilton Radnick and our very special guest, Dr. Jacqui von Cziffra-Bergs. Jacqui is an educational psychologist from Johannesburg and teaches solution-focused therapy to psychologists, social workers, counsellors, teachers and organizations. Jacqui started the Solution-Focused Institute of South Africa, which is a training organization that aims to teach and promote world-class training in solution-focused therapy. She has lectured extensively on solution-focused therapy throughout South Africa and in the United States. Jacqui has also written 4 books, her latest being Solution-Focused Brief Therapy and Clients Managing Trauma for the Oxford University Press. She has also currently released Creative Solution Building across South Africa that shows how solution-focused therapy is being implemented in different contexts such as medical settings, school settings, community projects and organizations. Jacqui is married and has 2 young sons that keep her feet firmly on the ground. So welcome, Jacqui. It's wonderful to host you in this context. We meet you in all sorts of different ways and shapes and forms, and today you in studio with Hilton Radnick over there in the corner.
Hi.
And we're talking about your favorite topic, which is solution-focused thinking and other interesting stories that you have to share with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Colleen. I'm very honoured to be here today.
It's wonderful to have you. So maybe just start off with a little bit around, yourself, a little high-level intro, what you're busy with, what keeps you. I know you said you've got so much time you hardly listen to podcasts.
That's right.
So little time, sorry.
I've got so little time at the moment. Well, I'm a psychologist in private practice, so my practice is relatively to completely full. And I have 2 sons, so I'm also a mother, which also keeps me extremely busy. And then I run the Solution-Focused Institute of South Africa, which is basically just a training institute, training people in solution-focused thinking. And that keeps me extremely busy. I started off presenting about 1 workshop every 8 weeks, so 1 every 2 months. And at the moment, I'm currently doing about 2 every 10, 12 days.
Sure.
So in the next few days, I've got 3 workshops coming up. So it feels as if I'm doing more workshops than anything else at the moment. So very busy.
So, Jacqui, thanks for that. I've known Jacqui for many years. We taught together at the same university. And maybe it's worthwhile just giving a little bit of an introduction to this whole topic, because...
Are you going to take credit for it?
I'm going to take
I'm quite
credit.
scared of what's coming.
I'm going to take credit for introducing Jacqui to solution-focused thinking and solution-focused therapy.
That is true.
My own story with it was that before I was a solution-focused therapist, I was a problem-focused therapist, which is often the way that the epistemology that was taught at universities.
That's how we were trained.
And I remember when I was a problem-focused therapist, how I always kind of felt like I just had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have proper handholds, and I was kind of winging it through the sessions. And then I read a book by Steve DeShazer, and it was like it introduced me to maybe 4 or 5 basic solution-focused questions. And in my next therapy session with a client, I just used those questions, and my therapeutic life changed in that moment. It just suddenly felt that, like every session, I was never running out of things to say. I knew what to do. And I'm interested in your experience with making the shift into the solution-focused world.
Well, Hilton, I just recall being a lecturer at the university and feeling so alone because everybody around you is so problem-focused, and everybody around you is so deeply investigated in finding root causes of this problem and deep conversations of what's going wrong and why and how long people have struggled with their symptoms. And I recall meeting up with you and feeling so relieved and less alone. Because here finally was somebody that was sharing ideas with me about how to do therapy differently. Because I often felt that I wasn't being helpful in a therapeutic space. You know, that yes, you'd try everything you could think of to help this person, and yet it was this constant spinning around problem talk and problem diagnoses. And finally, Radnik shared this whole approach with me that gave me another way to do it, that there are many ways to roam. We can be helpful by doing it in a different way. And after Hilton introduced solution-focused therapy to me, I actually went to Florida in 2002, which is such a long time ago, Hilton, and attended a Steve DeShazer workshop.
Wow.
And the thing that stood out for me in that workshop was here was a man doing therapy. This was therapy, but in such a completely different way to what we were taught. And I was amazed. In the beginning, I didn't understand what he was doing. I couldn't get how he was getting to helpful and usefulness by asking such different questions.
Right.
And this completely intrigued me, that we could get to usefulness so quickly and so effectively without having to dig into problem talk. And that's where my journey started, where I just read up as much as I could, attended as many workshops as possible.
Right.
And now I cannot think about doing it differently. Actually watching a session where the therapist or clinician is problem talking or trying to find out what is going on and asking all these why questions actually makes me a bit more than uncomfortable. You know,
Right,
it makes me uncomfortable seeing somebody turn into what I call a victimologist,
Right.
where they like overemphasizing the victim state of the client. And solution-focused therapy has helped me become a resilientologist. So I look for people's
Right.
resilience, their strengths, their coping.
So maybe let's take just a moment to think of the basic principles that are
Right.
involved in the approach.
Well, basically, it is a strength-based approach. So in any space where we work, whether it be therapy, whether it be an organizational change, we are looking for strengths. So it is a very strength-based approach that believes that every single situation has strengths, and that it's our job to find those strengths, to amplify strengths, and to use strengths to bring about change. I think another extremely important aspect of, or principle of, solution-focused thinking is that it's very strategic and goal-orientated, but not necessarily goal-orientated in we need to meet the goal. It's more about helping the client see other possibilities and finding a preferred future. We're looking at how things can be different. For me, one of the most important things is that we're not trying to fix what is wrong. We are trying to help somebody build a way of doing things differently. And I think that stands out for me. You know, I don't have to be a fixer of problems. I can now just be a builder of solutions. So I can help somebody build a different way of doing rather than analyzing and dissecting why they got stuck and why it's not working.
And maybe just to the foundations of it, and just for those people interested in the kind of social constructionist movement, is by talking about a preferred future, you've started the journey of creating one.
Absolutely, because Steve DeShazer said that language shapes reality, not only describes it. So, you know, we often think our language describes our situation. But DeShazer believed that the language we use can shape our reality. So we can construct a new way and a new way of thinking. Mark McCurgo calls it brain stretching. So by using different words, asking different questions, we're stretching somebody's perception and brain to think differently, which ultimately constructs their reality.
Yeah.
And I really like the approach in that it's assuming that we do have the resources. I suppose that's what you were speaking around, not being a victim. Because so often people come and they want advice and they want you to solve it.
Absolutely, Colleen, because the basic premise is that the answers are inside the person and that the person knows their own way best. So a solution-focused thinker's job is to ask questions where the person can hear themselves give their own answer. So I'm not giving advice. I'm asking a question which elicits their own strengths, which brings out their own internal resource, their own internal strengths, rather than me being the fixer, the advice giver, or the person with the solution. I build the solution with the person by asking them questions that bring out their ideas. So questions is a very important aspect of solution-focused thinking.
Is there is there a chance where people just get irritated with the questions and they're like, okay, stop asking me what the answers, I'm paying you to give me answers?
Absolutely. I get asked that question often. Because it is a model of questions, our whole approach is constantly asking a question and then building on the next question. However, I think the skill lies in asking questions that it becomes a natural conversation rather than a list, like an interrogation of, have you done this? Did you do this? How? Rather, it's just using the person's language and then building the next question so that it's a natural flow of questions and answers and questions rather than a whole list of interrogative questions. So to answer your question, has anybody ever said to me, stop asking me questions? One child did once.
Right.
A 5-year-old said to me, it's too many questions.
Cute.
So I realized, okay, got to do that differently. But in general, no. I think the skill lies in asking it as part of a conversation. And then very importantly, using the person's words to formulate the question so that all questions are so specific, so tailor-made to the person that it doesn't come across like a list. It's so specific.
I mean, does it ever happen to you that the answers that people give you, the solutions they come up for their goals, seem completely improbable, or even worse, seem like a bad idea?
Sure. That does happen because people, and I don't want to get too technical, Hilton, but when you ask somebody, what would you like differently? All right, or what do you want instead of your anger, or what do you want instead of all this desperate depression? Somebody might give you an answer that seems unrealistic. Like, for example, I once asked somebody, a younger teenager, so what do you want instead of all this anger? And he said, I just want some peace. And I said, so how do you, suppose you got that peacefulness, what would be different? And he gave a really unrealistic response and said, I would have killed my father. So that's pretty hard. And in solution-focused work, we are taught that we shouldn't get distracted by people's unrealistic answers, because everybody has good reason for answering what they're answering. So for us it is then to build on that and say, okay, so if your dad was no longer here, what difference would that make to you in your life? What difference would that make? And he said to me, I would be able to be myself without this person constantly hurting me, because his father was very abusive. So what difference would it make is a very good question to ask when somebody gives you an unrealistic answer, because it takes them out of head strategy, I must get rid of my dad, into heart's desire, I'll be able to have peace and be myself.
Well, I think in many sort of therapeutic interventions, if someone heard that, they'd stop the session, call the psychiatrist, admit him, and probably, you know, what you did was you just were like very calm, you stayed with it, and you got to what the real issue was underneath.
Well, for me, it's about building relationships with people and not with problems. So I ask questions to find the person, not to unpack the problem. You know, the questions I'm asking is to get to know the soulfulness of the person, the real person, not to get distracted by this problem-saturated energy. I ask questions to get to the heart's desire. I call it the soulfulness of the person, rather than what's happened to them and what has got them stuck.
So how purist are you in your approach?
That is a sneaky question.
Are you ever like curious? So, for example, like psychodynamic therapies would be much more based on getting insight and delving into the past. I mean, would you ever go down those trajectories just because it seems like that's okay?
You know, Hilton, a few years back, I would still go there, right? As my solution-focused language has developed, because I think it's a language, as my solution-focused lens, the way you look at people and life, as your solution-focused ear, the way you listen to people. Because I think to become a solution-focused practitioner, you have to have a solution-focused tongue, a way of talking. You have to have a solution-focused ear, a way of listening to people and not problems, a solution-focused lens, a way of looking for strengths. As my ear, my tongue, and my eyes have developed into a solution-focused way of being, I find myself becoming more and more of a, I don't like the word purist, because what is pure? But I find myself more and more of a solution-focused person, I suppose. And I no longer feel the need to go down that road of root causes. That doesn't mean I'm past phobic. I love the past.
Right.
You know? They're brilliant, beautiful moments of resilience and strength and coping lying in the past. So I do go to the past. But I was in New Mexico in February, and I was speaking to Evan George, who runs an organization called Brief in London. And he's one of the founding members of Brief. Fabulous man, written incredible books. And we were actually talking about this notion, who's a purist and who isn't. And in our conversation, I was saying to Evan, I know I'm solution focused, but I don't know how pure I am, because I'm also South African, you know, we throw our own stuff in here.
Right.
And Evan looked at me and said, as long as you're shifting people's attention, you're pure enough.
Okay.
Because Evan says our job is to become attention shifters. So if you ask me, how pure are you to shifting people's attention? I'm getting there, Hilton. I'm getting there.
So I have a bit of a different question around just your own resilience and your own way in which you manage work-life integration, because it's really tough to sit in a therapy session and you're doing, I don't know how many a day, and you're doing workshops and you're a parent, and that's a lot. So how do you manage your life in a way that you deal with all of that pressure?
You know, Colleen, without sounding like I'm repeating myself, but I think solution-focused thinking has saved my life. You know, I really, really think that it has saved me from becoming overwhelmed, depressed, feeling like it's all too much. And for me, it all boils down to the fact that by listening to people differently, by finding the hero inside the client, by looking for the wonderfulness of the client, by looking at this client and asking myself what inspires me about the person, it makes me want to work. Mm-hmm. It makes me cope with working, mm-hmm. and it gives me enough courage to be a mother, because that's the harder part, you know. But it also then forces you to look at your children through a solution-focused lens, through a strength-based lens, to look at your husband through a strength-based lens.
Tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm. And you know, the harder one for me is then to start looking at yourself, you know, through a strength-based lens, because that's the harder part. It always sounds easy to say, let's find strengths in people. But that's pretty hard for people to take. Because people are inclined to talk about all their negatives and what's going wrong. Elliot Connie said in New Mexico in February, solution-focused therapy sounds easy, but it's a hard way to look at life, because you're looking for strengths, you're looking for what is working. And I don't know why. I think people are inclined to moan and blame. It's kind of the easier way to go.
But isn't it evolutionary that we're much more vigilant for the drama and what could be a threat?
Absolutely. So in a way, solution-focused thinking is slightly counterintuitive, right? Because you have to think differently to stay there.
Yeah, definitely is a change of consciousness around the way you work with people. I mean, I remember as a problem-focused therapist, just the kind of gravity that you would it like took a lot. It was so heavy after a day. I think I've lost my fitness for therapy, but I just remember those things being like you would come out exhausted after every session. But solution-focused therapy kind of spun it around, because you were talking about hopeful things, achievable ideas, taking baby steps. It was just much less demanding emotionally, is what I remember it.
Absolutely.
And but I mean, I'm just interested in, because in your past you were a hypnotherapist.
What?
Jacqui was a very accomplished hypnotherapist, which has got its own kind of magic, you know, whatever. It's got its own kind of wizardry. And solution-focused therapies has got a different kind of wizardry. But I mean, in some way, the hypnotherapy is almost like magic in the way that it kind of happens and where you go with it. And I just wonder how it was for you trading the one for the other.
Hilton, I don't think I traded one for the other. I'd like to think that I've become more accomplished at doing hypnosis differently.
So are you still doing hypnosis?
No.
Oh. You're doing it in a solution-focused vehicle.
I'm using language differently, because for me it's about the language and the suggestibility of our language. Right? In hypnosis, we'd suggest a visualization of something, and we'd use language to encourage that visual or that possibility. I think I'm doing exactly the same, but I'm not using trance and all the wizardry, to use your words, that goes with it. You know, now it's the same thing, just in conversation. I mean, let's look at the theory. Milton Erickson was this accomplished hypnotherapist, and a lot of us that studied hypnotherapy studied Erickson's work. And Steve DeShazer, who wrote Solution-Focused Therapy, was Erickson's student. So DeShazer learned his magic and his suggestibility with words, and how words can shape reality, from Erickson's theory. So a lot of solution-focused therapists like Elliot Connie would say hypnosis and solution-focused therapy have nothing to do with one another. But then you go to a guy like Bill O'Hanlon, who studied with Erickson and who's known as a solution-focused or solution-orientated therapist, who would say it has everything to do with one another, because it's all about what he calls evoking possibility.
Right.
And making people see that there's another possibility. So I'd say I've just grown.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it differently.
Right.
It's just grown in using language and visualizations differently.
Your approach to change and your theory regarding change and how that works with people, because to change behavior is not easy. Was that being negative?
Not easy, but possible.
Yes. So what is your theory or your framework on change?
Well, first of all, because solution-focused thinking was written by two family therapists, it's got a very family therapy systemic way of thinking, meaning that our belief is that small change leads to bigger change. So my job is never to create happily ever after or massive change. My job is to help people think of small little things that can happen differently, because as they create one small thing, I absolutely believe the next change will happen. So it's about creating a ripple effect of change and not about finding the answer, the solution. It's about creating movement and ripple effects of change. I have the story, Connie.
I love your stories.
My father went to the china shop and bought a lime green piggy bank for my son. A horrible plastic lime green piggy bank that he still keeps it in his cupboard. And my dad never goes shopping with a wallet, right? He only takes cash out of his bag, puts it in his pocket, and then he goes and buys the paper and milk and bread and comes back. And any small change goes into the lime green piggy bank, and notes he puts back in his wallet. So when Luke, my son, was small, he'd run into my father's cupboard and shake the piggy bank every single time we visited to see how full the piggy bank is, because his grandpa said, when that piggy bank is full, you can get all of it. And one day this thing was full, and Luke was absolutely delighted. And we went home, cut it open, and it was a whole dining room table of coins. And Luke thought, this is so cool. So we counted all up and took it to the bank. And my husband came home with blue notes. So Luke really understood that a blue note is a lot of money. And Luke said to me, Mommy, I didn't know small change can make big money.
Wow.
Right? And for me, that is what is my perception of change. You know, small change and small little increments of change makes big money, makes big change. So my belief on change, small steps, small little bits of change, small little increments of doing things differently. Bill O'Hanlon wrote a book, a solution-focused book called Do One Thing Differently. You know, we only have to do one small thing differently for quite big money to happen.
True. So solution-focused therapy been around a couple of decades now, and growing. I would imagine that it evolves as a discipline. I'm interested in what are at the conferences that you've been to recently and the book you wrote and all the research that you've done. I mean, what are some of the changes that are happening in the field?
So at the conference now in New Mexico, it was interesting because there's actually a whole belief that solution-focused therapy was dying. You know, it was dying out and not really being used a lot anymore. However, the last 10, 15, perhaps 15 years has seen a lot of younger therapists using it, promoting it, writing a lot about it. Because it used to be presented in modules like an hour, maybe 2 hours if you were lucky, in a 2-year course. Whereas now you're getting universities that are presenting whole year courses or on solution-focused work. So what is really new, I think, at the moment is the need for us all to become more brief. I think that is what is really putting a lot of life into this approach, because it's a brief approach and life is fast. People want instant gratification, instant change. People don't have money for lengthy therapy. So there's this whole new life being created, and a need for solution-focused therapy and thinking because of its brief nature.
Right.
And one of the big things in New Mexico was a lot of presentations on how we can become even more brief.
Yeah, I know there was, even like in South Africa, in the context, I guess, in many parts of the world, is sometimes helpers have a single session.
Right.
Single session interventions.
Absolutely.
And what are you going to say in an hour with someone that is going to have the traction to change their life? You're definitely not going to make it work with the psychodynamic intervention.
No.
So you need powerful tools, and I think solution-focused therapy offers the most powerful tools in making those things happen.
Absolutely. And one of the keynote speakers in New Mexico was about single session therapy, and how we can have effective change in one session. Look, sometimes we have it by default, where you have a client, you do something in that session and they say, that was just fabulous, I don't need to come back.
Oh, I hate you, I'm not coming back.
My hope is that it was really good. However, this keynote was specifically on how we negotiate a single session with a client. So it's a contractual agreement. We're only going to have one session, and we're going to make it as useful and impactful as possible. And then the bottom line, the next question you might ask is, how do you do that? How do you create impact in 1 hour? Or in some of like student counseling units, in 30 minutes. They don't have an hour. So how do you make a useful impact in a very, very short period of time? And I think the bottom line lies in knowing what the client wants, having a very, very clear goal, and working very strategically in the space of time you've got to answer the client's goal, and to consistently bring strengths into the session so that the client is empowered to reach that goal.
And it makes sense for me also that would be the kind of medium that lay counsellors would work in, and whatever, people in churches, hairdressers. It just makes a lot of sense that's the mode, because you don't have any demand on you to solve the problem.
Absolutely.
You have just the skills to facilitate a session with someone so that they can move forward.
And you have the skills to be part of a useful conversation. So becoming extremely popular in coaching. If I look at how the clients of the institute have changed, we started off just training psychologists, then psychologists and counsellors. Then it started psychologists, counsellors, social workers. Then psychologists, counsellors, social workers, teachers. And at the moment, it is spreading into organizations, coaching, lay counsellors, leadership. So, and no matter where you're implementing it, as you said, Hilton, it's about having a useful conversation that leads to possibility or change.
Right.
So I'm interested in the parenting angle. So you want to speak a bit about your book and some of the work that you do in schools and teach with teachers and...
Right. So at the moment, schools and schools as organizations and teachers have become a very, very big part of what I do. So about 5 years ago, I did a massive project for KwaZulu-Natal Education, and we trained over 500 teachers in the rural areas in solution-focused lay counselling.
Wow.
Because these teachers are at the forefront of all what's going on with the youth, and they were not equipped to handle difficult conversations. And from that, I wrote a book for them, solution-focused lay counselling skills. And that has really grown tremendously. At the moment, it isn't just about counselling skills. So I get invited to present at numerous different schools on different topics. This year alone, I think I've already gone to 12, maybe 13 schools already. And the topics vary. So solution-focused discipline, for example. Solution-focused parent interviews. How can a teacher have a parent interview with a parent where the conversation doesn't turn into a blame game or a problem-saturated rehashing of what's going on, what's wrong. So parent-teacher feedback discussions, that's been quite a big topic. Just changing the status quo of a school, looking more at finding strengths in schools and children rather than, because schools can be problem saturated. And then also looking at solution-focused ways of working with one another as a teacher body. So that's been quite a big part of our work this year.
I've got a solution-focused challenge for you. How do you give Eskom feedback around our current power crisis?
My son brings me Eskom jokes.
Oh, my word.
All the time. Little memes about what stage 7 load shedding looks like and, difficult questions. But however, again, a solution-focused approach would be looking at what are our resources in terms of people, situation, and how do we utilize that to change a very difficult situation. Once one starts looking at the problem, you lose track of people's resources, because then it becomes a blame game. However, if you start looking at people and people's ability to work, to change, to put things together, it becomes a different scenario. I don't know if that's going to turn the lights on, though, but it is a different way of looking at it.
Maybe you'll have to go back to your wizardry.
Yeah.
When you have a teenager and you want to have a solution-focused conversation with said teenager around, just doing your work, putting in your effort, and really one of the common things is teenagers seem to just be on their phones the whole time. So I've tried this, and I get, my children are a bit, I think, psychologized. Then I don't, stop asking me those questions. I don't want you to ask me those questions.
Right.
So is there a way?
So Colleen, I have entered the wonderful world of being a teenager mother.
Yes, welcome.
As a therapist, I love working with teenagers. It's the space where I am most comfortable, I think most creative, and I love the chaos that teenagers bring into the therapeutic space. A different story as a mother, right? Because as a mother, you've got this chaos on a phone in your house. So I'll just tell you what has worked for me. Ben Furman is a solution-focused psychiatrist in Helsinki, Finland. And I absolutely adore his work. I love reading about him. I love listening to all his work. And Ben says that in the presence of a problem, there is an absence of a skill. All right. So when you are confronted with a problem, instead of asking yourself, why do I have this? Or in the case of a teenager, why is he always on his phone? Why isn't he, whatever the question might be. Instead of asking all the why questions, rather ask, what skill is he lacking? Right? What does he need to get better at? So I'll give you an example in my own home. We were on holiday. I've got a 14-year-old, and he is all about himself. It's all me, what he wants, when he wants it, how he wants it. And my German husband was getting really upset, and it was becoming an unpleasant family vacation. So walking along the beach, I don't miraculously remembered Ben Furman saying, in the presence of a problem, there's an absence of a skill. So I was walking with my teenager, and I said to him, you know, we all need to learn to do new things in life to get on as a family. And I'm just wondering, you know, your dad's been on your case this whole holiday. And he said, yes, Dad's always shouting, Dad. So I said, well, I'm just wondering, what do you think you need to get better at so that we can have a nicer holiday? You know, what do you need to get better at? Kind of trying to ask him, what skill are you lacking? And he said, I need to be more considerate. And I thought, thank goodness he said
Good
it.
answer.
Right. And then unpacking. So how would you do consideration? Suppose you were more considerate? What would you be doing differently? What would we notice you doing? And as you were becoming more considerate, what would your dad see that he isn't seeing right now? So for me, it's about, instead of facing this problem that feels like a mountain when it's a teenager, you know, and it's instead of constantly asking yourself, how am I going to solve this? What is wrong with this child? Why are they like this? For me, a solution-focused lens and tongue would say, all right, it is what it is. But what skill is lacking here? What skill is my child lacking? And perhaps what skill am I lacking in order to handle this? You know, what do we all both need to get better at so that the situation is more healthy? And I must be honest, that really helps me.
Well, I think that's a beautiful example, but there's a strong component that your son had the ability, was very articulate, he went inside himself and he came with the answer. The challenge is when there's the answer, I don't know.
Oh, we get confronted with I don't know as therapists every single...
How do you deal with that?
I love I don't know. I really do. Because I don't know just means I've asked a really difficult question and the person is thinking. And sometimes, you know, Hilton, remember when we were in our problem medical model, we were taught that I don't know is resistance. You know, the client is resisting change. I don't know, to me, is just that the client hasn't thought about it yet. The client has never thought of this way of thinking. Perhaps it's such a hard question that they really just don't know yet. So the question was, how do I handle I don't know? I throw yet at people. Yeah, just add a little yet. So you don't know yet. Or you haven't thought about it yet. All right? Yet is what the solution-focused therapists call presuppositional language, just meaning you talk the language of suppose or possibility, or at the moment you don't know, or currently you can't find the answer yet, which just gives the person, the feedback you're giving is, you just don't know now, but you'll know a little bit later. Or you could say, suppose you did know. So presuppositional words are things like at the moment, currently, right now, yet, or suppose. And building up my vocabulary of presuppositions has really helped me with I don't know.
Solution-focused therapy's got lots of tricks to deal with the I don't knows, and I remember that we would often ask, well, you know, what do you think a good friend of yours who was watching you would maybe tell you to do in the situation, or those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I mean, it sounds to me like there's a consciousness around solution-focused thinking that is a mode that you step into. So you're saying, right, I'm in solution-focused mode. I mean, like if you're having a fight with your husband, will you be straight in the solution-focused mode, or do you have to like stop yourself and say, okay, so let me become solution-focused now, or you just want to vent for a while? And
again, that's a Rudnick trick. I'm married to a German. Firstly, I do think it is a mindset. All right, it is a mindset you step into. Initially it becomes something you work on. Right, and you're trying to train your head to get to, because I wouldn't say that I am a naturally optimistic person. Right, so it's not as if by default I go there.
Right.
I have had to learn a solution-focused shift at looking at life. Some people choose this way of working and thinking because it resonates with their positive, optimistic self. For me, it has saved me, right? Because it helps me think, look, talk differently. So initially, it becomes something you work on. And then later on, now, I think I can actually confidently say I'm starting to be that. People pull you out of it, like a fight with your husband. A client that is problem saturated will pull you back into problem talk and will yes but you, right? Yes but, and then go into problem talk. And for me, that's when it takes a lot of me effort within me to not get dragged into that, and to continuously pull myself back to a mindset of at the moment, right now, currently. You know, you just haven't learned how to speak nicely to me yet, my husband.
I'm interested from a leadership point of view how you would use this with delegation, and specifically with perhaps very passive subordinates who will just bring a situation and I don't know how to handle this. How can you frame delegation and leadership in a solution-focused way?
Well, at the moment, Mark McCurgo is probably one of the leaders in solution-focused leadership thinking. Mark McCurgo wrote a book called The Leader as Host. Or it might be called Host Leadership. Where he talks about guiding people, even those passive delegates, into a space where everybody's has an opinion and where we encourage collaboration, participation, and joint working towards something. And McCurgo's book has 6 very specific roles of a solution-focused leader that guides the leader into making everybody part of. He likens it to like a dinner party where the leader is the host, and how you get everybody at the dinner party to partake and be part of where you're taking your organization or the situation. And I personally loved McCurgo's book and can highly recommend it because it just gives you that idea that leadership doesn't mean top down, right? It's not, and it doesn't mean complete and utter submissiveness either. It is a collaborative hosting of a possibility and hosting an idea to change and work towards something. So yeah, I hope I've answered that one.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of possibility for solution-focused thinking in businesses, in our everyday interactions with clients, with our employees, with everybody. Yeah,
absolutely.
Jackie, I just wanted to... How many books have you written?
4.
4 books.
I'm busy with number 5.
So I'm in awe of anyone who's written one book. So, I mean, maybe just talk to me as a writer. How do you do it? How do you sit down and get it done?
I'm going to give a deep sigh now. So the first book was out of necessity because it was a project. We needed material, especially to put into rural areas. It was, so that kind of did it because it was a necessity and it was part of a project. The creative solution building book I wrote, which is about solution-focused therapy in South Africa and how it's being implemented in different settings. I think what really motivated me to write that is I didn't write the whole book. I edited it. I wrote about 6 chapters. But I felt other people's voice needed to be heard. And the motivating factor there, what kept me going, was the beautiful things other people had written that I really wanted people to hear. And I wanted it to be shared. So I think I get a lot of energy in sharing my writing, and collaborating with other writers. The book I've just written for Oxford University Press, I wrote with 3 American authors. So there again, it was in collaboration with people that you're sharing ideas with, and it was an incredible experience to write a chapter together, because as he's writing, you see what he's writing, you add to it, and it just felt like we were building this incredible body of information.
So what's that book? What's that book called?
So that it came out last year, August, and it's called Solution Focused Brief Therapy and Clients Managing Trauma. And I wrote it with Adam Froer, Elliot Connie, and Johnny Kim. Each one of them work at a different university in the States. And it's all about different perspectives and different traumas and how we, as solution-focused therapists, work in these different scenarios. So writing, what inspires me and what keeps me writing is working with people, actually, Hilton. I think I'd struggle to do it just on my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting in that when you refer to trauma, and I guess the question is with like hardcore pathology, clinical cases, is that your mode of working as well? I mean, is that...
Well, I work with any client, right?
Right.
As Elliot says, we work with people's preferred future and not with their pathology.
Right.
And anybody has, and anybody and everybody has a preferred future. So it doesn't matter whether it's severe pathology, severe trauma, severe abuse. It's about what that person wants differently and how we're going to get there.
Cool.
Interesting. The end of that book, it was very difficult to end that book. So the 4 of us sat, we were on Skype, and we were like, oh, we really spent like a whole year unpacking what we're doing about trauma. And Johnny and I wrote one on sexual abuse, and Elliot wrote one on infidelity. I wrote one on violent crime, and Adam had gone and done incredible work on human trafficking. And this book was now, we were very proud of it, but we didn't know how to finish it. We didn't know how do you end? And Johnny, who works at the University of Denver, suggested, why don't we each just write a little paragraph or 2 on how come we're still able to work with trauma, right? What is it that makes us able as therapists to continuously work with trauma? And we the 4 of us each unpacked how come we're able to continuously see 5 or 6 clients a day. Most of them are trauma cases. What keeps us going? And it all boiled down to, we can keep doing this because we look at people as heroes and not as victims, and we are amazed at people's resilience.
Right.
So Johnny ended the chapter, and he titled the last chapter Vicarious Resilience, meaning we too can be inspired by by people's stories. So instead of suffering secondary trauma, we can actually be inspired by their resilience.
Amazing.
Well, I think it's a great privilege to work with people in the space that you do, and I think that's always your intention when you work.
Absolutely.
It's a bit of a segue, I think, based on Hilton's question, but what is the standout session that you've had that just always sits with you in terms of the response and the outcome?
Wow, one session, one person. I suppose if I really had to choose one, because it's very hard, working with heroes, and as Michael White wrote about people's wonderfulnesses, working with their wonderful resilience, I've got many stories that stands out for me as a wow space and a wow situation. But for me, one that stands out because I lecture about it, I suppose it's something I use often in lecturing, was a trauma case where I saw a Zulu-speaking man. So it was a cross-cultural session, and this man and his family had been through a very violent hijacking and home invasion, and he was kind of forced by his wife to come for therapy and was extremely reluctant initially. Had also been for trauma debriefing. And sat down and said, I don't know what I'm going to say to you. I don't want to be here. I've been through this debriefing stuff. And that doesn't work. So, it's automatically put on the back foot. And his session turned into, all right, so that didn't work for you. What could you and I do in this session that would be helpful and would be more... It would make you feel like if you leave here, you got value for money. And he just said, I need the flashbacks to go away, and I need to be able to take care of my family. And I was very cautious to ask him, what would that mean? Because so I just went into a scenario which Ben Furman actually spoke about. Where he says you need to introduce pride into spaces. We need to make people feel proud. And this man had survived a hijacking. So obviously I can presuppose they'd done things to get through it. So I said to him, I'm just wondering, if you think back and you think of what your wife did, what did she do that you are most proud of?
Wow.
And our whole session was just based on going through each member in his family and what each member did that he is proud of. And then I asked him, so if your family had to look at you, what would they say they are proud of you doing? And it was this beautiful unpacking of a family's ability to think on their feet, to support each other, to be extremely resilient. And I think why it really stands out for me, Colleen, is at the end of that session, this man looked at me and said, may I go home and tell my family this version of what happened to us, which means we changed the flashback.
Wow.
Right? Because now that was his goal to start off with. Let's go and remember this version. And I think for me, that's what really showed me or gave me the idea to say, let's become resilientologists rather than victimologists. There's enough of that out there.
That's easy. So one last question from my side. I know we're running out of time. It's gone so quickly. There are many lists of solution-focused questions you can find on the internet, and some of the common ones. What's the
miracle question,
miracle question,
exception question, scaling.
But are there some Jacqui questions that you would share? 2 or 3 of your favorite questions that have really helped you in your toolbox.
Well, Definitely, but I won't call them Jacqui questions. I mean, that would be lovely if I could own and claim to have been clever enough to think of the. But there are definitely questions that I use all the time, and that work. So the very first question would be what Brief calls the best hopes question, which is a goaling question.
Right.
So what are your best hopes for our conversation? And it's not what are you hoping for, it's what are your best hopes, right? So we really want you to think out the box. So I love the best hopes question. The miracle question, I must be honest, Hilton, I hardly use it, but I use suppose. Suppose, because isn't that what the miracle question is? It's a suppose question.
Yeah.
Right? So suppose things were different. Suppose you could use your strengths. Suppose. I really love using suppose. And then one Elliot taught me is to ask people, so what difference would this make? What difference would it make?
And scaling? Do you use scaling at all?
I use scaling a lot. All right, I work with teenagers though.
Right.
I love scaling. I love asking people to think where they are now, where they want to be, and what would it take to move a little bit up. It's visual. I'm a very visual person, so I love scaling. And playing with possibilities of scaling. So yes, lots of scaling questions. Lots of what would it look like if you got to your goal? Turning the picture into what would it look like? What would you be doing? What would people notice is different? So those are my favorite.
Right. Yeah.
And then in trauma, I bring in pride. What are you most proud of? Because that changes the energy of the session as well.
I mean, do you ever find in trauma that people just want to actually be in the trauma for a while before they're ready to let it go?
All the time. Absolutely. And why not? And people often say we as solution-focused thinkers just put plasters on, we Band-Aid approach. We're not problem phobic. We're not. We still know how to listen,
right.
how to acknowledge. People need to be heard.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
People need to be heard, and I often find in trauma, if you ask the best hopes question, it's as if the client doesn't hear you.
Wow.
They don't hear that.
They're not ready to be.
No,
in the best
they
hope.
don't hear hope, and you ask. So, what is your best hopes for coming to see me? And then they'll tell you what happened. All right, they'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
It's as if they just are so stuck in that trauma rat that they can't hear a different question. So for me, my goal is to then acknowledge, validate what let the person be heard, but then not to get dragged into the trauma story and then ask a best hopes question later.
Right. I mean, I remember reading that, we're not solution forced, we're solution focused.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So where could people get hold of your book and attend your training and find out more about you?
So they could look on the Solution Focused Institute of South Africa's website. On the website we've got all the upcoming workshops. I bring an international speaker a year. And this year we're bringing out Ben Furman from Finland, and I cannot wait to learn from him.
When is that going to be?
That's happening on the 16th and 17th of September.
Wow.
So absolutely excited about that. So one can look on the website for the international speakers and then workshops I present. Books you can also find on the website in our shop or on Amazon. That's basically or you can look on my Facebook page, also the Solution Focused Institute of South Africa, or follow me on Twitter. I Twitter.
Do you?
I do. I tracked a lot.
So we're going to post all of those on the show notes, all those
Great.
links, so people can contact you.
Thank you, Colleen. It'd be great to hook up with people.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say that, Jackie.
Am I not allowed to
No,
say that?
hook up is not what you think it is.
Ah,
I've been taught this by my teenagers. You will connect.
so it would be nice to have conversations
Yes.
and share.
You know what they
Keep
say
it
about
platonic.
language, eh?
Cool.
So, very wonderful conversation. The time's up. Any last closing thoughts?
No, thanks, Jackie. That actually made me inspired to think about therapy again.
And Dr. Rudnick, I'd completely forgotten how we started this journey.
Right.
So here at the end of our conversation, I want to thank you
Oh.
for introducing me to solution-focused therapy and changing the whole journey I've been on, and then for inviting me here today to remind me of how it all started in conversation in a cold passage
Right.
at a university.
Yeah. No,
Are you
cool.
proud of your student?
You know, I mean, the best thing you want for your students is that they just overtake you and take it to where you could never. So, yeah, I'm in awe of what Jackie's done with it, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done. So thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you for having me.
The value in this method is that by focusing on what you want the solution to be, as opposed to an emphasis on the problem, your time and focus is on developing action steps towards the solution. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and comment and check out our website www.omnicore.co.za for our blog and previous episodes. And once again, a big thank you to William, our producer.